It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. If you're on hold and want to weigh in on whether or not Karen Bass is going to survive her horrific performance in the fires, stick with us. And if you want to join us, give us a call at 800-222-5222. Barbara Stone joins us. We've got one more hour, live and local, right here on the John Phillips Show. Talk Radio 790 KABC. And we continue at 2:07 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the day off. He'll be back with us on Monday. 800-222-5222 is a telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. If you're on hold and want to weigh in on whether or not Karen Bass can survive this latest round of scandals, stick with us. We'll get to your calls later on in the hour. If you want to join in, you can do so at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. But right now, it is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She is the Professor of Political Science Emeritus at California State University at Fullerton, Professor Barbara Stone. Welcome.
Happy Thursday afternoon, John.
Happy Thursday to you, too. Let's start out talking about Karen Bass, because in a state as big as California, in a one-party state as big as California, we have a lot of people in elected office who are truly bad at their jobs. But if you don't cut through the noise, people don't know that you're necessarily bad at your job. And if you have a job like being a member of Congress or a member of the state legislature, maybe even a county supervisor, most people don't know that you're bad because your power is distributed among other people, and who's to say who's really bad and who's not? If you're mayor, if you're governor, if you're district attorney, if you're a sheriff, people understand at a certain point if you're bad at your job. Sometimes you can be so bad that you cut through the noise, and even people who aren't particularly engaged in the news cycle understand that you're bad news. That's certainly what happened to George Gascon when, even as an incumbent Democrat, he got tossed by voters in a blowout election last cycle when he ran for re-election as district attorney. Karen Bass has said that she will run for re-election as mayor of Los Angeles, but her performance all through the fires has gone from bad to worse. Now she is demanding an investigation as to why she was allowed to go to Ghana to attend the inauguration of the president over there. She said she didn't know anything about the wind. She didn't know anything about the fire risk, despite the fact that the fire department was on every platform imaginable warning the community about it. And her own Twitter feed, even before the fire started, warned about the high winds and fire risk. Do you think she has performed so bad that she will be dumped from office and this is going to be a problem for her continuing her political career?
John, her displayed idiocy is almost beyond my ability to imagine. And I can imagine some pretty bad things about some of the people you were just talking about. I can only figure she froze. But it's been going on for weeks. You realize I've tried to read to give her not a benefit of the doubt, but to see what she's actually saying about how she didn't know about it. And the best interpretation I can come up with was, well, her fire chief needed to see her personally and tell her, no, it's not just a big wind's coming. It's really, really bad, and there is a threat to you. So you should stay here. Somehow or another, her fire chief was supposed to think of that. And when she didn't basically order her to stay in the country, it was the fire chief's fault. By the way, the fire chief would have been fired had she done that, but what can I do about that? She just, John, she literally is beyond words. It began with that first non-interview when she was waiting to get off the plane at LAX. And wasn't it Sky News that had a reporter and a cameraman on there? going, do you think you should have gone to Ghana? Do you think? And she just stared straight ahead, looking like a little statue. At that point, you knew the woman had absolutely no idea how to respond and shouldn't have been surprised by what came afterwards. I'm getting around to a direct answer to your question on whether she can survive, but let me throw in here that you know how bad her staff has to be. Seriously, because you read all the stuff about when Lindsay Horvath is mad at her, and that, my dear, is everybody who listens to you know, is the quite left-wing former mayor of West Hollywood, and she's mad at her because of the way she's operating. They have no idea what they're doing, and that's the kind of thing staff could fill in. So you have an ignorant, incompetent mayor just beyond, and a staff that apparently is the same. Fits my view of how City of LA runs, but what can you do? Now your question is, can she survive this? The election's next year, so she doesn't have a lot of time to get by this. And John, it will depend so much on who runs against her. You realize what's coming up in the city of Los Angeles? This is 2025. The election will be 2026. Not only do we have the fire recovery, in 2027, I think I'm right, isn't the Super Bowl at the Rams place? And so you have a Super Bowl coming up, and in 2028 you have the Olympics coming up. And I've already seen where, well, we can't do this, that, and the other to move forward on contracts for the Olympics because we're busy with the fire. This city is in a world of hurt, and someone who runs against Karen Bass, bringing up those things, going, look, I'm sure she's a nice black lady, and that's how she gets along, by seeming nice compared to the others, and she doesn't giggle like another person like that. But that basically the city of LA, you can't afford this, and they might actually see it. Problem is you have to have someone running against her to say that. And if she's so far gone that, like Gascon, virtually anybody can beat her, you should really worry about what that could turn out to be. I will reference the city of Chicago, who got something worse than what they had when they finally figured it out. So all I can say is, thank goodness I don't live in that city. I don't think you do either.
How many of these problems, not that this is going to reflect well upon her, but how many of the problems with the lack of communication between departments in this city, particularly anything that involves a fire department, can you pin on her liaison to the fire department being on administrative leave for calling in fake bomb threats? Because you look at her claims that she was never informed that the wind was going to kick up while she was in Ghana. Okay, so the fire chief is supposed to go directly to the mayor. The person that the fire chief usually speaks to is no longer there because they're on administrative leave. There's no water in the fire hydrants. There's no water in the reservoir. No one bothered to communicate that information to the fire department. I guess if there's no liaison, there's no point person that makes it very easy for that information to be communicated. There was even a debate as to whether or not the budget for the fire department was cut. The fire chief said it was, and Mayor Bass said it wasn't because they spent the money on certain things that she regarded as one-time expenditures. Okay, there's clearly a lack of communication going on there because someone in a critical role was a buffoon and spent their time calling in bomb threats instead of doing their job.
That is so wonderful. I can't stand it. I mean, if you look at politics as the theater of the absurd, we don't need to get beyond the city of Los Angeles. Now, I'm going to actually be a tiny bit defensive for them here. That city is set up so the idea that you have to have liaisons and communications is just a non-starter. I'm going to say all, that probably is a lie, but most of their large functions are carried out by these seriously independent, over time, remarkably corrupt entities. And they don't see themselves as cooperating, communicating with anybody. The airports are run by people who, it's amazing how often over time they get kickbacks from vendors. Water and power, let's discuss them. Nobody that goes to your reservoir. I don't know anyone who expects water and power to be effective and efficient. They just hope they aren't too corrupt. Their public works people run the same way. That's how LA runs. And so, yeah, the one liaison person, and he'd be easy to blame and whatever. But it's the way the stupid city's set up. And you ask, why would they do that? Lots of people are making lots of money. More importantly, John, city of LA would be too big and too complex if you actually had competent people. And it's been a long time since you had one of those.
I'll tell you, when you look at this and you look at all of the potential things that could go wrong with these fires, whenever there was a fork in the road, she took the wrong turn just about every single time. It's hard to identify anything that she did after these fires started that was correct.
I can't find one. And you get down to, okay, she didn't know what she was doing. That's a given. You elected a person like that. What did you think you were going to get? But you'd think at least on things that strike me as being of superior political value, she couldn't even do that. I'm still trying to figure out what she was doing with Soberoff, other than making sure he hates her. But just the whole thing, I still haven't figured that one out. And reading the Times stuff, by the way, your point on the Times and what's going on out there and what you can now find is actually quite interesting, unless what it represents is that everybody's turned on her, in which case that's interesting. But you saw where one of the things Lindsay Horvath is mad at her about, that she asked the county to stop having their daily press conferences. I don't know if you watched in those early days. Believe it or not, I actually listened to and or watched those county press conferences because they had the relevant people there. They lined up. Catherine Barger was there. Horvath was there. But they had all the relevant people, the sheriff, their public works director, all those people, and they actually gave you information. The mayor asked them to stop it. I am confident because she wasn't there, she wasn't being featured, so the spotlight was not on her. Now, she should have been very happy the spotlight was not on her, but apparently that's not part of her makeup. So they stopped doing it, and then suddenly the next day, boom, she has her own press conference without telling them. John, the level, that's political incompetence. It's not incompetence where the city's concerned in terms of trying to make something happen. But I don't understand how you can be in politics as long as she was and think that was something you could do and not have somebody just come out hating you. But she did it. I'm trying to think of anything I can say she did right. She froze. Has to be that. Even if she's an idiot, although she has a master's degree from my institution I attended, so I should be careful there. Even if she's all those things, I don't see how you have that level of political malpractice. And I'll come back to blaming her staff, and it still can't be her staff. It has to be her. Although you do wonder how much of the stuff that goes out, oh, look, Karen Bass did this, Karen Bass sent this email, actually didn't come from her. It came from rather incompetent-looking staff. John, it blows you away. Oh, well, I don't live in that city. Have I mentioned that in this interview?
Let's go back to the claim that she made. She claimed she did not know there was heavy wind. She claimed she did not know there was a fire risk. She's
lying to her teeth, but go ahead.
She said that no one told her, and she said she wants a full and complete investigation as to why. I guess the insinuation is that she was set up in some way. by the fire department or by the people around her. Now, all of us know that's not true. That's what she said to Alex Michelson on Fox 11 earlier in the week, and it appears as if she's going to stick to that story. When you run for re-election, it's not just you. You require surrogates to go out and make the case on your behalf on programs like this, at community forums, at party events, at interest group events. You can't be everywhere. You need people to speak on your behalf. If you are a Karen Bass surrogate, or you are an elected Democratic office holder in Los Angeles County or the state of California who has supported her in the past, maybe even in this next upcoming election, and you get asked that question, I don't see how you defend it.
By the way, my personal opinion on that one is, as she's floundering around, what she's doing is she's taking her cue from Gavin. Isn't Gavin always going to have, when something happens, he's immediately going to have an investigation of this, an investigation of that? And, of course, you never hear about the outcome of the investigation because it never happens. I will make the assumption that that's what's going to happen here. And if I'm her surrogate, okay, John, if I'm in the political place within the Democratic Party where I actually feel I have to go out and campaign for the black lady mayor of L.A., and there will be a number who will be that way, I'm just going to say the investigation's ongoing. That's what I'm going to say. Or I don't know, or some you just sort of throw something out there and move on to why she's just this wonderful person you can't get rid of. I honestly see your problem is that you're rational, and you would hopefully not be out front for somebody for an office like this that was totally incompetent. But when people have other reasons for doing it, they'll just pretend it's not there, just like she's going to. Well, that's going to get interesting, unless and until she goes, well, it really is the fire chief's fault, and we're going to fire her, in which case the blood on the floor from that will be worth the price of admission.
When you talk to your liberal Democratic friends, and you worked in an industry where that's what you were surrounded with, what are they saying about her right now? Are they defending her performance, or are they just shaking their head?
The ones I interact with shake their heads. And actually, it's interesting what they pick up or don't pick up. They don't pick up as much as I would think they would, but one the other day said something to me about, and it was about the Steve Soberoff bit, but it was that he was going to be being paid $500,000 for 3 weeks of undetermined work. I haven't heard anything that would pass for a defense of her. Now, to the extent anybody's thinking about it, John, I'm going to guess that in your mind you're waiting to see who else and what else emerges, because you're going to assume it just can't be her. But do not ever underestimate what might happen in those political circles. Well, as I say, I don't want to lose friends, but my closest Democrat friend, who's a true liberal, she doesn't want to talk about her. That's easy.
All right.
Which tells you a lot.
Let's move on here for a second, because Kamala Harris, according to a recent poll, is leading a very crowded field in the race for governor of California in 2026. Many candidates have officially declared. She has not. She said she hasn't made up her mind in terms of what she's going to do with her political future. If Kamala Harris were to run, the assumption would be, based on these poll results and other factors, that she would be a heavy favorite, that Democrats would coalesce behind her, and she would likely make it to the November ballot. It would be unbelievably embarrassing for a former vice president to not make the November ballot, so the assumption is that she would. If she runs for governor of California, Do you think she would be doing so because she doesn't want her Wikipedia page when she's dead and gone to say that she ran for president after Grampy Joe dropped out at the 11th hour and she lost to Donald Trump? And she wants something else to be there other than sitting on corporate boards and teaching classes at Ivy League institutions and, I don't know, doing whatever former politicians do? Or do you think she would be running for governor so that she would keep herself relevant, she could promote herself as the foil to Donald Trump and everything coming out of that White House, and she would have a platform to get herself booked on cable news and put herself in front of Democratic audiences so she could then run for president in 2028, and not in an abbreviated campaign, but a full campaign where she has all the time she needs to win on her own?
Believe it or not, and I know you're running tight on time here, we've seen a version of this one time before in my lifetime, though it pains me to admit I'm this old. Richard Nixon lost barely to John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1960. He had every intention of running again because he believed that the election had been stolen from him. And he had every intention of running again in 1964. Politicians like this always do, and I believe so does Kamala. So the whole question about do you run for governor is what you were mentioning about keeping yourself relevant. And if you go 4 years, 3 years, and they haven't seen you, you know what? People are going to forget about you, and others who are in positions, like Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, can do things to be in the news, be here. And I know for a fact from people who should know, so that's pretty close to a fact, that the Nixon people decided he had to run for governor to keep himself in front of the public, because then he would be assured of the Republican nomination in 4 years. I believe with all my heart that that discussion is going on between and among Kamala and her advisors. And the one thing the Nixon example has to offer is that it's fine. Yes, it would keep her in the eye. Yes, you would assume she would win. But suppose she doesn't. Okay, suppose for some reason the people of California decided we've heard enough of Gigglepuss and we're going to go somewhere else. Now, this would have to be the general election, because I don't think you'd have a primary worth talking about. It's that risk that will keep her from running if she doesn't run. Otherwise, she will, and for what it's worth, John, she can wait a long time to decide, okay? These other characters, nobody's ever heard of them. And so she can wait until pretty close to the last minute, and it will be a question of whether or not she should go to make sure that she's the Democrat nominee for president, and not just depend upon her gender and race to get her there. So that's what I think's going on. And Republicans, you better get your act together, because you never know.
Professor Barbara Stone, Professor of Political Science Emeritus at California State University at Fullerton. Thanks so much for stopping by.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, John.
Right now it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And if you'd like to continue listening to the show after I sign off at 3 o'clock today, that's easy to do. All you have to do is subscribe to the podcast edition of this program on your handy-dandy iPhone, and all of the episodes will download automatically on your phone, so you'll have more episodes at your fingertips. All right, if you want to weigh in on whether or not LA Mayor Karen Bass will survive one bad news cycle after another, including claiming that she had no clue it was windy, She had no clue there was fire threats going on in Los Angeles, and that she wants a full investigation as to why she was allowed to go to Africa. You think she's going to survive that? I'd love to hear from you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. More of your calls coming up, but right now it's time for headlines. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. Do you think Karen Bass is going to survive this latest round of bad stories, including, by the way, a brand new one that just broke this hour? I told you that James O'Keefe was claiming publicly on social media that he had a tape of an LA City staffer, a Bass staffer, talking about the real reason that Karen Bass went to Africa when we knew that there would be heavy winds and fire risk. On tape, this staffer said that she went because, quote, there was nothing they could do. And then he went on to blame residents in Pacific Palisades who lost everything because he said, quote, their yards were out of code like nobody gave a bleep. So apparently, at least privately, that's what some of them are saying. Let's go back to the phones and begin with Chuck in Agora Hills. Chuck, hello.
Yeah, look, here's the bottom line, guys. What can we do? We hired her. She's in charge. She's following in goose step with Biden and Harris. She does what they want her to do. Obviously, she's a loser. She's lying just like Biden did for 4 years. You know where I'm going. Seriously, I'm a twin of Barbara of what she said. If I can just say it that way. Barbara, get her back on the line. She could articulate a lot better than me. But it's a rare appearance. I wanted to come in and say something because I'm just tired of this crap. I went to the fire aid. I support the victims. Those victims better get their money. And basically, I grew up in this town. I love Los Angeles. And we will build back, and we will be better. But this politics has been going on for 57 years, as long as I've been alive. God bless you guys.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to David in Los Angeles. David, hello.
How you doing? I love your show.
Thank you.
I want to point out interesting, parallel incidents. Several months ago, our illustrious Kamala was on a show that she felt very comfortable on, and they asked her a pretty simple question. After promising all this change, what you're going to do, and she said, well, you know what she said. She said, I wouldn't change a thing. That was the moment that she politically slit her throat, among others, but that was probably the grand dance of all. In the same way, our other things that the two have in common, they probably wouldn't be where they were if it weren't for affirmative action, and they probably wouldn't be where they were if they weren't the gender and the race that they are. But when our illustrious mayor said that she was actually trying to find somebody of why she didn't go to Ghana, and she's looking for somebody to blame, that I believe and hope is when she finally slit her throat politically. And if she's looking for anybody else to blame, I think it's obvious. Grampy Joe told her to go. Why not pull him into it?
Now that would be a curveball. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Morris in Panorama City. Morris, hello. All right, let's go to Ed in Santa Clarita. Ed, welcome.
Yes, thank you for taking my call, John. I just wonder, that why is it that we know that these elected officials are incompetent bunch, but that's who we voted for. So we get what we deserve. We get what we voted for. But we don't vote for the fire department. Okay, that's a government institution that is supposed to be self-sufficient. And for them to come to me and say that, oops, I can put out the fire on your house because there is no water on the hydrant. I mean, whose job is it anyway? Isn't that part of what they should do? Oh, by the way, your house is about to catch on fire because I failed to enforce code and regulations about how far those branches should be from your property. So I'm sorry, either way, your house is going to get burned. Really? Seriously? Why do the fire department get a pass on their responsibilities?
Yeah, if you translate all that to English, the answer is just don't blame me. I don't care who you blame, just don't blame me. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Larry in Torrance. Larry, hello.
Hello, John. Good show as usual. I'm thinking next year's mayoral election could be something like that of 1994. In both cases, there was a mayor at that time, Tom Bradley, who was way left of what they appeared to be. In both cases, there was a crisis that unmasked them. In the early 90s, it was the riots. This year, it has been the fires. Tom Bradley could not survive another term on account of his behavior during the riots. I think it's possible that Bass will not be able to because of her conduct.
Yeah, you go back to that election, and Dick Reardon, who ran against Tom Bradley, ran kind of as very close to being a Rick Caruso type of character. His campaign theme that election was Dick Reardon, tough enough to turn L.A. around. And it was like the Gascon election. Granted, Tom Bradley did not run for re-election. He chose to take a pass on that, and it was Michael Wu, who was the Democratic candidate in that election, who made it to the general election ballot. And Dick Reardon beat Michael Wu very badly, pretty much all over the city of Los Angeles, and was a two-term mayor, a very popular two-term mayor. Certainly that is possible, and I agree with you. There are a lot of similarities between what is going on right now and what was going on in Los Angeles in the 1990s. Thank you for the call. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. More coming up in moments, but right now it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. What do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy? AM 790 KABC welcomes Dierks Bentley, the Broken Branches Tour featuring Zach Top and the band Lula to the Intuit Dome on June the 26th. Tickets are on sale next Friday at Ticketmaster.com. However, if you're caller number 9 right now at 888-790-5222, that's 888-790-5222, you'll win a pair of tickets to the show. All of this furnished by our friends at Live Nation. Good luck dialing. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. As I mentioned before, James O'Keefe has come up with new audio of an aide to Karen Bass at the city of Los Angeles, essentially saying the real reason she went to Africa after we were warned about the heavy winds and fire risk was that it really wouldn't matter, that if there were fires, that neighborhood was going to burn down anyway because none of those homes were up to code, so what are you going to do? If that's the strategy moving forward, it's not going to get any better for LA Mayor Karen Bass. In fact, it's going to get a lot worse. We'll have more on that tomorrow and more on that next week when Randy comes back right here on The John Phillips Show, Talk Radio 790 KABC.